Hello and welcome to this sound exploration of color through musical instruments. The term we use for that is timbre. And as I was preparing for this, actually over on the comment board, just in the gallery here, I noticed that somebody had said as a question, how do you explain color to someone who is colorblind? And this exploration, I think here, is actually potentially one way to answer that question through timbral interchange between these different instruments, saxophone, flute, and violin. I'd like to introduce my two esteemed colleagues, Sonja and Mike Giles, both of them in the music department, and the people I particularly hoped would be interested in doing this project with me, who are both improvisers and experienced musicians in all aspects of music, but particularly in the modern aspects, which is this is going to explore. So we're going to pick 5 paintings and works of art to explore sonically from this exhibit in the next few minutes with you. And we're going to go through a whole range of sounds. Some will be kind of a ambient sound. Sometimes we might call it white noise. And then we're going to explore occasional random sounds that will, we think, maybe tie in with one of the other paintings. And these paintings will come on the screen as we do this, so you'll get to see how we're interpreting them. The painting actually behind us here is one of the ones we're picking at that point. Things will get a little bit more aggressive, just temporarily, but we're figuring that's one way to potentially explore the colors and the use of paint in that particular canvas. There's a painting that has a reference, at least a potential reference to American flags, so there'll be some aspects that I think you'll pick up quite easily that are patriotic. And then over here behind us, which we're also including Washtub Blues, we're going to include some aspects of Americana that are from the African tradition. And some of those may not be quite as easily recognizable. There's a spiritual called Ain't No Grave Can Hold My Body Down. And that goes basically, okay, so you hear that kind of thing. That's going to be in there, and we'll do snippets of these and sort of interweave them amongst each other. And the other song that we've chosen to include is from a group called the Fisk Jubilee Singers. This is a very important group from the historically black college university, Fisk University, after the conclusion of the Civil War. And they were very famous. They toured the nation singing African American songs. This one is called I'm A-Rollin' Through an Unfriendly World, and it sort of goes like this. I'm a-rollin'. So if you hear some snippets of that, that's tying in with the Fisk Jubilee Singers. So we want to bring them all together. And how we interweave this is going to be up to us in the moment, and that's the fun of it. It's all improvised. We have just this loose sort of plan that we're going to work out. Would anybody like to add anything to that?
It's different every time.
And that's the cool part about it. So we'll see how this turns out. Here are 5 of the paintings from Color Matters, interpreted through sound. So this is a chance for you to interact with us, ask us any questions you might have, or make comments, or if you have concerns even about what happened that we'd be curious about those. We'll try to react. That's what this exhibit's called.
I can get us started. One of the first classical pieces that I ever heard when I was a high schooler was Wazowski's Pictures at an Exhibition. And I still love to hear it. And we learned two versions of it, the classic one and the one by Emerson, Lake Palmer, which I haven't heard for many years, but another interpretation of it. And I hadn't thought about it until I saw this little piece, which thought, well, I'm at an exhibit and I hear music that's supposed to introduce me or connect with those pictures. But then I thought I saw a difference between those two. When I listened to the other work, the pictures of an exhibition, it's always one picture at a time. But here, it seemed to me you were moving in your music from picture to picture to picture, even though there was a focus, obviously, on some of them more than other times. So is this the way that you had intended it to be, to sort of mix these pictures rather than to look at one at a time? Yeah, let's look at one at a time.
So what I was thinking was, I knew that we had 5 images, and I understood what we were maybe collectively trying to convey about the image. And then I just kind of like have those in the mix. You know what I mean? I'm not thinking chronologically, which doesn't limit me then as an improviser to kind of go forwards and backwards and then swerve around a little bit and come back to some things, or instead of like check, 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 check. I know that we were maybe trying to show some forward direction in the pieces to line up with the film, right? That we introduced the different images in the film. But I think, like, realistically, when you look at something or experience something, you probably don't have that isolated experience and do something else, right? Because that next experience may actually remind you of a previous experience or a sensation or something. So when I'm creating sound, I'm trying to be in the same musical space with my friends here, my friend, and then trying to consider the artwork that's there, and maybe I can refer to it, or maybe I can not do anything with it, but just try to be true to what the space for me is kind of informing me and telling me. That's super ambiguous, but that's sort of what's going on for me anyway.
And, you know, you were comparing this to pictures at an exhibition. Obviously, that's a written down work, and so thought out, and then people play it. And one big different factor with us, I'm not an improviser all the time, and by all the time I mean very infrequently. By very infrequently I mean you might have seen the first improv section. But Mike improvises all the time, and when he teaches it to students, he often will say, this is the variable that I want you to think about improvising. Like maybe everyone just plays the note A, but you can play it in different registers and with different rhythms and with different timbres, and you could probably be making air sounds, so it could be an air sound over an A versus a real ta with tone on the violin or saxophone. So when he teaches it that way, then you can be as creative as you want within that parameter. And so for our performance that you saw today, Jonathan had spent so much time with the artwork that he kind of provided a loose outline and parameter in my mind of a storyline and just different emotions and different thoughts that we were thinking of. And then we spent time on our own trying to figure out how we would say that in sound. And then we got together and, and put it together. So in that way, it's a little bit different from pictures at an exhibition, because he got to write it down and say, okay, I want to tweak this, I want to tweak this, and I want to tweak this. And Mike is really good at not wanting to tweak things over and over again as an improviser's mind, and my mind is more like wanting to control it. And that was really good in our first run through. Can I do that again later? And so I tried to be more free also, to just react to what these guys were playing and try to be in the moment. So.
And my feeling about it was that, I mean, as I put up in this thing, that we're in a time when, if you look at that third paragraph on the left, Black Lives Matter, Green New Deal, red versus blue votes, white privilege, rainbow pride, other colors are part of our social consciousness in very, very real and immediate ways right now. And those aren't the only ones, but those are just some that I could mention. And we're very aware of this. And we should be. I mean, this is a good thing. And so as I picked these particular paintings as opposed to some of the other things in the room, I kept coming back to where there's so many things that are not integrated in our country. They're not integrated in our social experience. They're not integrated in our personal experiences. We experience them in a siloed kind of a way. And yet, even though we experience them that way, they are integrated. We just may not have them integrated for us, or somebody else that we may wish would integrate them is not. And so what I wanted to be sure I did with my two colleagues here was to keep bringing back things once in a while that kept saying, in my own mind, I'm integrating, whether it's the patriotic themes or the slave songs or those kinds. I want to integrate those. And so even if we're in the moment where we're interpreting that painting, I want to bring a moment of another one back. Or and Mike just doing the same thing, and so was Sonja. They were bringing back sounds from the first paintings. In fact, we ended up sort of creating this art form throughout the whole thing, where we came back to some of the kinds of sounds we were doing at the beginning, just in pure raw timbre sound. And then Sonja's last boom D, that was a perfect ending. I mean, when I heard that, we didn't practice that. And I said to myself, don't anybody else make any other sounds in Sturm. Don't touch your bow on that string. That's the perfect ending. And then it turned out to be that we all sort of felt that was the end. So trying to integrate and yet trying to be spontaneous. We had one time where we met yesterday morning, before we did this yesterday late afternoon. We met yesterday morning and sort of talked through it, tried something and said, well, let's Mike was really helpful in saying, let's be patient with how we evolve this, and let's not get too fast through things, and gives everything a chance to have its own space, but also to see how it evolves. And so when we came out that afternoon yesterday, it was a lot more, it was more organic, and it grew more in a more interesting kind of a way. And we could have done 2 takes on it, but we liked what we had the first time. So.
Yeah, it's a group sound also. I think that something that I am so fascinated about in the process is, like, I might be thinking stuff, right? But I hear other people doing things that might be covering what I was thinking. And so then that loosens up my direction to, I could either be a part of what that is, or I could choose to do something different, supplement it. I could choose to lay out, and laying out's the hardest part. I'm watching the video, and there's a section where I'm not playing, and I got this like angst face, you know, because I'm just struggling with, I don't know, you know, I don't do something or do something, you know, and you want to be careful about how you contribute to that, because sound and absence of sound are on equal footing. Yeah.
Yes.
The gentleman in the.
I'm really curious about the idea of pairing this static art that is around us, and obviously the process that the artist took in creating it was not static, but our experience is very static in seeing this, with the idea of improvised music as a as the audience experiencing improvised music in response to static art. And I wonder if you could just talk, I found it very compelling, just talk about that. I wonder if you could talk about that choice of deciding to do the improvised music rather than either composing a piece that you would all play together that we knew what it was, or choosing, there's probably plenty of other already composed work that would be interesting to pair with this. Why the improv, and how did that process come about? I'm very curious about that.
I'll start it, and then you can pick up, because it was my idea to contact Mike and Sonja. Lila, the curator, had said, well, usually we have several events associated with these React exhibits, and very often they're speeches or, you know, kind of talks. And we're going to have a gallery talk later in October that I hope you'll also attend. Ani Benken, our Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Liberal Arts and Sciences College, will present that. But it occurred to me that I had this amazing resource, because I'd heard Mike, and I've actually worked with Mike one time when we did some jazz together, and I've heard Sonja and her flute choir in our department presenting, and her students presenting these phenomenal, cool, very modernized sounds. Beatboxing through a flute is just one example, and other sort of very modernist sounds that violinists tend not to do. We tend to be, you know, more conservative. We're playing music from the 1700s. They're playing music from now, and I needed to make myself current. So absolutely, I said I want those sounds. And there was actually a time when they modestly tried to dissuade me and get me to get somebody else to do it, because, you know, the string quartet or something. I said, no, I really want you guys, and so I'm glad you said yes in the long run. But I knew that if we played a piece of Beethoven or something, which piece in this room really reflects Beethoven? You know, these are by sometimes still living artists, or if they're not living, they're pretty recently deceased, and so that wouldn't work. And there's a few pieces for violin, you know, that may be written by an African American composer in the 1950s, for example, but you got to have a piano, and we didn't have one of those in here. And frankly, I just thought, this is all about color, and the title of the show, Color Matters, I meant it to sort of spark several thoughts in the mind. One is matters pertaining to color, and the other is color in our lives, intellectually but also socially, really does matter, especially right now, as I referred to over there. And how do we bring immediacy and relevance to this in a sonic way. And so these are the people I immediately just thought of. And they couldn't make me go to somebody else. And I'm glad I just recognize them the best. So.
To your point, I read a book by Anne Hornaday. She's a film critic for the Washington Post called like Moving Pictures, maybe. It was short, thank goodness. But she mentions seeing films at certain ages or in certain periods of your life, what you are bringing to it as you watch the film affects your, I liked this, I didn't like this film spoke to me, this film's amazing, or whatever, right? You kind of like, you come to those things and encourages, especially if you didn't like a film, to go back and watch it again at a different part in your life where things are different for you. I think improvising with static art is at least you're making an attempt to make it in this moment, for me, today, I feel this way about what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing, and I'm trying my darndest to try to express it accurately and graciously and kind of serve the universe space which I'm residing in. And I think if you're playing prepared material, that's a pretty hard commitment, which kind of falls in line with the static art. I mean, there it is. And tomorrow, it'll be there again. You know, I mean, it's in that form. But I like the dichotomy of it. Because I think that if we all go around and look at these sculptures and look at the artwork and you spend some time with them, even in that same setting, you may look at this and go around and then come back and look at it again, and you're in a different headspace. Your eyes are in a different spot, your heart's in a different location, for you, and you're able to kind of like, maybe you like it worse, maybe you like it, you see what I'm saying? There's like different things that happen in that moment. So I like the absence of firm commitment to it, that you can find in improvisation. And the stuff that's on the tape, I don't know that I would play that now. I mean, maybe I would, but I don't know.
I know I couldn't. I couldn't do the same thing.
Yeah.
And to play off of me just for a second, if you don't mind, Sonja, from me saying, you say these are static, and a piece of pre-composed music is also static.
Mm-hmm.
So now that requires that the audience can transcend the wall that's between the static sound and the static visual and see a connection. Whereas what we did is we left that wall completely out of there, and we were integrating with this stuff in the immediate moment, so there was no wall between two static pieces. And back to your point, Peter, the pictures at an exhibition began as an improvisation by Mussorgsky, and he improvised enough times and figured out what he wanted to do and wrote it down. But the first time he saw that art, it inspired him to improvise. He didn't write a finished product directly out. Nobody does. It's like we made a rough draft of a term paper.
I have nothing to add on that. I like everything you said. I just listening. Sorry.
Are there other questions or thoughts or comments?
Maybe just to follow up on that, if it had been a written piece, I don't think I would have come. I think that the idea was really intriguing when I read it, and it immediately hooked me. I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to check that out because I've never been to something like that. And then the next comment, you walk in and you see it, and immediately you kind of feel a little bit of anxiety. You wonder, oh, how is this going to go down? Is this going to be weird? Is it going to be a complete flop?
Right.
And I just want to say, it wasn't. I think it was really well. It was really well done.
One vote.
Yeah,
Not a complete flop.
and I'm sure you get more of them. So it started out, and immediately you have this angst.
Yeah.
You say, oh gosh, how is this going to be? And then it comes together. And I know that from other improvising acts that I watched, at first you wonder, and then you get into it and it grows on you, and it was great. So you guys did really well. And maybe one question, one reason why it really came to my attention when I thought I want to see this is when I got the impression that you guys were going to do it live, and then you changed it. Why? But for safety reasons.
Yeah,
okay.
COVID. Yeah. We didn't know how many people would be here,
Yeah.
and then we play unmasked, obviously, so
Yeah.
even though Jonathan could safely play masked.
Okay.
So, this is a pandemic where it gets ugly headed at a different.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we were able then to find a creative solution to be able to do the music, include some film magic with it, right? And piece that all together.
Okay.
You were able to actually, by having it be this way, be able to see all the stills, instead of like, now which one am I looking at now, right? You're able to kind of capture it all in one spot. So there's an advantage to that.
And then
That's
maybe
thanks to Lila and Alicia back there who are really doing some really good work for us, and on short notice.
Yeah. Maybe if I can ask one other question. So you guys touched on it already in terms of how you prepped for it. So, and this was only one take that you showed us, but in how far did you guys come together and decide what it's going to be? Did you decide on a time, or could this have gone on for an hour, or
I think we kind of thought we wanted to, maybe the 10-minute mark was sort of what we were looking at. We talked about that.
I lost all concept of time while it was going on, honestly. I mean, when we got done, I didn't know if it had been 2 minutes or 35. But we had, and this was explained at the very beginning of the film, Jonathan kind of gave some comments about how he felt about each of the 5 pieces. And so we had, like when I was talking about parameters, we just had like little triggers. So we knew the first piece, we were trying to have this kind of white noise and the white space. And then with the second painting, that there's the little bit of red with all of the white. And so then a little bit of sound to be introduced, kind of pointillistically. And so when I heard that, then I thought, we're moving on to 2. And then, and again, it's reactionary, and...
You know what's fascinating? I thought you started that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I moved on to 2 because I thought you'd moved on to 2. That's the improvisation. That's fascinating to hear you say that. Wow.
Yeah, we did have one meeting to talk about it, and we played something, and then something I had mentioned I'd like to credit my therapist with, going from all white with texture and depth, right, to white with a red dot. My therapist had asked me to not focus on the red dot, but acknowledge all the white that's there. So that comment, I think, changed how we decided to play through that image of not just hammering, although the piece is called Focus on the Red Dot, is that right?
The importance of
Or the importance,
Right.
so, but there's different ways to view these things. And I thought more about it, and I thought if I were viewing this from an aerial view, right, is this an island of red with white surrounding it? Just different ways to kind of look at the imagery and the coloring. But we were able to talk a little bit about those concepts, and I think that helps give some type of shape. Within freedom, there is structure, right? If you have some type of structure and idea that you can be free within, then you're in good shape. Kind of like what you were talking about earlier, like a one controlled group and everything flows around. I keep thinking about those old-timey videos you see of the people in the jalopies and they're walking around, and then they're at these intersections and it's just big, where everybody's kind of crashing into everybody because there's no structure. Everybody can go whichever direction they want to go and do whatever they want to do, but then that doesn't necessarily give it anything. The difference between this and this is the connection of this hand to this hand, and not just this hand floating out here doing nothing, So it was important, I think, to have some type of corral, some type of parameter from which within that you go crazy.
And I wanted to react to one of the things you said, because it's something I talk to my students a lot about. And you said you were a little nervous, what might this be like? And this is something that performing musicians and just musical artists in general deal with all the time, because visual art is art in space. And in space, you can say, I don't like that, and then dismiss it that fast. And yet, music is art in time. And once you've committed to in the space where that art is, the theater is the same thing, it's art in time. And if you don't like it, you're kind of stuck unless you're gonna be rude. And people are not willing to dedicate their time in their one and only life as much as they're willing to be exposed to something that they can bypass quickly if they don't happen to like the space that it's occupying. And so we find this with modern music all the time, that audiences choose to not attend a modern music concert, not even to take a risk on it, because they are afraid that they are not going to enjoy the time that they've dedicated to it. Whereas they can go to a modern art wing, see something, and as long as it's not truly disturbing to them, they go, I don't like it, and move on. You can't do that with music. Or theater. Once you're in the room, unless you're sitting on the very edge of the row. Are there any other comments or questions or thoughts?
I have one. So I did notice or perceive that some of the abstract in pictures, what you all played were a little bit like, didn't have a lot of structure. But then the last one, I could hear some like harmony and more rhythm. So I am wondering, or I am curious about the shapes, not only the color, but the shapes and how you kind of relate that to what you want to play. If you had that in mind or not.
Yeah, I did.
I think so, because, again, we were trying to go with one idea and then be free around that idea. And so when we first got together to talk about our ideas of each piece, it had been brought up, what if we were to play this type of tune or this type of tune, or what if we... And so for the last piece in particular, there was way more harmonic function to it, just because we were going with a melody, right? But if you think about it, we're all melody instruments. Violin is usually melody, saxophone, flute. And so it was kind of fun and freeing for me that as I heard the melody played and then improvised around, I thought, well, I guess I'll be the bass line or rhythm. And that's when I decided to make some air sounds around it, just to kind of fill that in.
But that was actually stylistically appropriate too, particularly for the Washtub Blues painting, I think, to have that style in there. And that's not an abstract work of art. That is. And you can interpret, I could do something that was not abstract and say, that's how I see that painting. It's not how I see that painting. In fact, I don't see that painting as the painter wrote about it. I don't see it the way the painter envisaged it. So, that's just my interpretation of it. So this was, and they'll probably admit that I sort of said, I laid down some things that I thought would be appropriate or would work, and then I asked for the feedback on it, and then we adapted and adjusted. But there was a message that I was hoping to convey through this with the three of us, and I think we did. But that I did want a message to get across too. Mike, do you want to add anything?
No, that's a good question that you asked, though. Did we answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Very
sure,
much.
appreciate
Please
you being
pass
here.
around to your friends and colleagues that this is here, and it's open 1 to 4 weekdays and
Yeah, 12 to 4.
12 to 4. Sorry.
Monday through Friday, and then we have, as Jonathan mentioned, we have a gallery chat that's coming up. We have postcards here with Monique Duncan on the 27th. So that's our last kind of formal event, but there's a lot of time to see the exhibition. It closes on the 29th. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah.